My family forgot my birthday, then used my money to throw a huge party for my sibling. Family is supposed to be about love and support. At least, that's what I always believed. Through every stage of my life, I thought that no matter what happened, my parents and siblings would have my back the way I had theirs. It wasn't just some idealistic notion. I had built my entire identity around the idea that you help the people you love no matter what. And for years, I did. I had a well-paying job, and I never hesitated to step up when my family needed something. Rent was short, I covered it. Bills overdue, I sent money. My parents needed help fixing the house, I paid for repairs. My sibling needed a loan for school or a new car. I wired the cash without a second thought. I told myself it didn't matter. It was family. I wasn't keeping score. But looking back, maybe I should have. Because I didn't realize that to them. I wasn't a son. I wasn't a brother. I was an ATM with a pulse. Then, everything changed. I lost my job. It wasn't anything dramatic. No scandal, no major screw-up. Just corporate downsizing. One day, I was doing well. The next, I was unemployed, sitting in my apartment, staring at the email that said my position had been phased out, like I was nothing more than an afterthought. It was a gut punch, but I wasn't too worried. I had some savings, and I was confident I'd bounce back. Besides, I had always been the responsible one. I was the one people could depend on. I figured my family would support me the way I had supported them. I couldn't have been more wrong. At first, they just acted different. When I called my parents, the conversations were shorter. My mom, who used to check in regularly, suddenly stopped reaching out. My dad, who had always been at least somewhat interested in my career, barely responded when I told him what had happened. My siblings, who had never hesitated to ask for money, went radio silent. But I kept making excuses for them. They're probably just busy. They're giving me space. They don't know how to help, so they don't want to make me feel worse. I told myself every excuse in the book. Because the alternative, the idea that my worth to them had been tied entirely to my ability to provide, was too painful to consider. Then my birthday came. I wasn't expecting a big celebration, but I thought at the very least I'd get something. A phone call, a text, a half-assed HBD in the family group chat. I woke up that morning and checked my phone. Nothing. I brushed it off. Maybe they were just waiting until later in the day. Maybe they had planned a little dinner or a small get-together or something. By noon, my phone was still dry. By evening, I had to accept it. My entire family had completely forgotten about my birthday. No calls, no messages, no acknowledgement that I even existed. I told myself it was fine. I wasn't a kid anymore. I didn't need cake or balloons. But deep down it did hurt. Not because I wanted presents or attention, but because it confirmed what I had been desperately trying to ignore. I was only important to them when I had money. Still, I tried to move on. Maybe they were busy. Maybe this was just a one-time thing. Maybe I was overreacting. And then, a week later, I opened social media. And I saw it. A massive birthday party. Not for me. For my sibling. I scrolled through the photos, my stomach twisting tighter with every picture. It wasn't just a small gathering. It was a full-blown event. Luxury venue. Custom cake. Expensive catering. Dozens of guests. Decorations that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And gifts, so many gifts. It was the kind of celebration I had never received, even in the years when I was financially supporting them. At first, I told myself they must have been saving up for this for months. Maybe that's why they didn't do anything for me. Maybe they just wanted to make this birthday special for my sibling. But then I checked my bank statements, and that's when I realized the worst part of all. They had used my money to pay for it. Months ago, my parents had asked me for a loan. They told me they were struggling, that they needed help covering some unexpected expenses. At the time, even though I was unemployed, I gave it to them because I still believed they wouldn't ask unless it was something serious. I thought they needed it for rent, or medical bills, or groceries. Instead, they used it to throw a lavish party for my sibling. I felt sick, like the world had tilted under my feet. I called my mom immediately. My voice was shaking, but I kept my words calm. "Mom, I just checked my bank account. The money I sent you, was that for the party?" She sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Well," she said, "your sibling actually had something to celebrate." Something inside me cracked. "What?" My voice came out hoarse. "You used to be successful," she continued, her tone utterly dismissive. "But now, What would we even celebrate for you? I was speechless. My dad, ever the stoic one, chimed in. We just figured it wouldn't matter to you. Wouldn't matter? I swallowed hard. So, when I had money, I was worth celebrating. But now that I don't, I'm just what? Useless. My brother gave a short laugh. It's not a big deal. You'll have another birthday next year. Something inside me shattered. I had spent years giving to these people, supporting them, sacrificing for them. And the moment I couldn't provide anymore, they didn't just forget about me. They took the money I had left and used it to celebrate someone else. That was the moment I realized the truth. They didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I could give them. And now, I had a choice to make. I could demand my money back. I could cut them off entirely. Or I could get revenge in a way they'd never forget. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember much of anything in those first few minutes after my siblings' careless, dismissive words rang in my ears. It's not a big deal. You'll have another birthday next year. Like I was nothing. Like I hadn't spent years making sure they never had to struggle. Like I hadn't emptied my savings for them when I didn't even have a job. My hands were shaking. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wasn't just angry. I was hurt in a way I couldn't even describe. It was the kind of pain that doesn't just sting, it changes you. For a long time, I just stood there in the middle of my apartment, staring at nothing, the realization sinking in deeper with every passing second. They didn't forget my birthday. They ignored it, because in their eyes, I wasn't worth celebrating anymore. And yet, they had no problem using the last of my money to celebrate someone else. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I had spent my entire life investing in something I thought was solid, something I thought was real, only to find out it was a lie. I could still see the party photos in my mind, flashing like a slideshow of betrayal. The decorations, the catering, the gifts, all the things they decided I didn't deserve. I had spent years believing I was part of a family, but that wasn't true. I was nothing more than their financial safety net. I was their security blanket, their backup plan, their walking, breathing emergency fund. And the moment I stopped being useful, I stopped existing to them. I had always told myself that family was everything. That no matter what, you don't turn your back on blood. But they had turned their backs on me a long time ago. I had just been too blind to see it. Not anymore. Not after this. I wasn't going to be the family piggy bank anymore. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the next time they needed something, knowing damn well they'd forget about me the second they got it. This time, I was going to do something about it. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my banking app, scrolling through every single transaction from the past year. The rent I had helped cover, the medical bills I had chipped in for, the emergency loans I had given them, all with the promise that they'd pay me back soon. They had drained me, and I had let them. I was done. No more money. Not a cent. I wasn't going to be their personal bailout fund anymore. One way or another, I was going to make sure they felt the consequences of what they had done. I wasn't going to let them brush this under the rug. I wanted them to feel it, the way I was feeling it now. I sat down at my desk, my mind racing. There were so many ways I could go about this. I could demand every penny back, threaten legal action if they refused. I could get creative, hit them where it hurt the most. But before I did anything, I needed to see just how deep this betrayal went. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I logged into my old email, the one I had used for family finances, the one I had mostly abandoned after I lost my job. And as I scrolled through the messages, I felt my stomach drop. Because this wasn't just about my money. It was worse. So much worse. I don't know what I was expecting when I logged into my old email. Maybe some overlooked transactions. Some extra proof that my family had been taking advantage of me for longer than I realized. But what I actually found, it made my blood run cold. I scrolled past months of old invoices, bank statements, and payment confirmations, most of them transfers to my parents or sibling. But then, buried beneath the usual requests for help, I found an email from my bank. A loan application. I stared at the subject line, my stomach twisting into knots. I never applied for a loan. I clicked the email, and there it was in black and white, an application for a personal loan. Under my name, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The loan had been approved months ago, and the money? It had been deposited into my parents' account. My breath came in short, uneven bursts. They stole from me. This wasn't just borrowing money with the intent to pay it back later. This wasn't just them guilt-tripping me into handing over my savings. They had stolen my identity to take out a loan in my name. I scrolled through the application details, my vision blurring with rage. They had all my information, my social security number, my income details, my previous job information. They had faked my signature. And the worst part? The loan was still active. I was the one responsible for paying it back. Me. And I had no idea. This wasn't just about the party. That money wasn't some rainy day emergency fund. It was part of the celebration. The venue, the catering, the gifts, it hadn't just been funded with my savings. It had been funded with debt. Debt that was now an MY name. I had never felt rage like this before. I had given them everything. I had spent years supporting them, making sure they never had to struggle. And when I finally hit hard times, they didn't just abandon me. They buried me. I shot up from my chair so fast that it nearly tipped over. My body was shaking, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud, a crime, and they had done it to their own son. I paced my apartment, my mind racing with what to do next. I could call them, demand answers, scream at them until my voice gave out. But what would that do? They wouldn't care. They had made it painfully clear that I wasn't family. I was a walking ATM, a resource to be used and discarded. No, I wasn't going to argue with them, give them the chance to manipulate me again. This time, I was going to destroy them. I sat back down, my hands still trembling, and started typing. I drafted an email to their fraud department, outlining everything I had found. I attached screenshots, bank statements, the forged loan application. I requested an immediate investigation. Identity theft was a felony. I dialed the non-emergency police line and reported the fraud. They asked me if I wanted to press charges. I didn't hesitate. Yes. I logged into my bank and froze my accounts, canceled any shared access, changed my passwords, set up fraud alerts. They weren't going to get another cent from me. I started informing all my relatives and friends. I had spent years helping my family, paying their bills, covering their expenses, taking care of them whenever they needed. And how did they repay me? Without my knowledge, he took out a loan in my name, by using that stolen money to throw a party for my sibling, by leaving me drowning in debt while they celebrated without a care in the world. I attached screenshots, proof, names, details. My extended family, who had no idea what was happening, were losing their minds. My parents' friends? Shocked. My siblings' friends? Disgusted. And my parents? They started calling. Again and again. I let it ring. They could rot. Because I wasn't just cutting them off. I was making damn sure they suffered the consequences of what they did to me. The fallout was immediate. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, calls, texts, voicemails, all from the very people who had drained my bank account and left me in financial ruin. Now, suddenly they cared. Now, they wanted to talk. But I let the phone ring. Messages followed messages. My mother was furious, demanding that I discuss this with the whole family. My father insisted that I was making a big mistake and should call him back immediately. My brother, who had so casually dismissed my existence a week earlier, was now irritated, saying that I was blowing things out of proportion and making things worse for everyone. Everyone? They had ruined me, and now I was the problem? I stared at my phone in disbelief. These weren't apologies. There was no guilt, no remorse, just panic. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they had been caught. I refused to answer. The next morning, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. It was someone from my bank, following up on my fraud claim. After reviewing the evidence, they confirmed that the loan had been taken out fraudulently. The investigation was moving forward. And the best part? I was not responsible for repaying the loan. A wave of relief washed over me. I had been drowning in financial stress, thinking I was stuck with this debt. But now, the truth was out. The fraud was confirmed. My parents were fully responsible. I thanked the representative, ended the call, and sat in silence. I had spent my entire life believing family was everything. That no matter what, you don't turn your back on blood. That same afternoon, another unknown number popped up on my phone. This time, it was the police. The fraud department had reviewed my case, and based on the evidence, they were moving forward with charges. My parents were being contacted for questioning. I wondered what their reaction had been when they got that call. Was my mom crying? Was my dad furious, scrambling to come up with an excuse? Was my sibling finally realizing that this wasn't just going to go away? For years, my parents had taken from me without a second thought. They never considered the weight of their actions or what it meant to drain me dry while living off my hard work. And when I was no longer useful to them, they discarded me. But this time, there was no walking away from what they had done. This time, the consequences were real. After I reported the fraud, things started moving fast. The bank officially labeled the loan as identity theft, and within days, investigators reached out to my parents. At first, they acted confused, trying to brush it off as a misunderstanding. My mother played the role of the worried parent, saying they had assumed I was okay with it. My father, ever the manipulator, acted offended, claiming it was all temporary and that they had always planned to pay me back. None of that mattered. The evidence was there, clear as day. The forged signature, the money deposited into their account, the repeated payments withdrawn in my name. It was all documented. There was no twisting the truth. For the first time, my parents weren't in control of the situation, and they didn't know how to handle it. As the case progressed, my parents realized that they had no choice but to make a deal with the investigators. The truth spread faster than I expected. The rumors had already passed through family and friends, and people were shocked. Some had always believed that my parents were struggling and doing the best they could, not knowing that they were using me to keep themselves afloat. Others who had known them for years admitted that they had seen signs of selfishness, but never thought they would go this far. Friends who once admired them pulled away. Neighbors who used to greet them warmly now avoided them. Even some extended family, who had been on their side for years, started keeping their distance. They had always cared about appearances, about looking like the perfect, hardworking parents. But now, everyone knew the truth. Their shame was no longer something they could hide behind closed doors. Eventually, the fraud case was taken to the prosecutor. Since this was their first offense, they weren't looking at serious prison time, but that didn't mean they were off the hook. The bank was pressing charges, and the court wasn't about to just let them walk away. Rather than risk a trial, my parents were given a deal: 3 years of probation, financial restrictions, and in order to repay every cent they had stolen, along with additional legal fees. The worst part for them wasn't even the punishment itself. It was the fact that they had no way out of it. They had spent the money, and now they had to pay it back. They couldn't take out another loan. They couldn't rely on me to save them. They were drowning, and for the first time, I wasn't there to pull them out. My father lost his job soon after. His employer didn't want to be associated with someone involved in fraud, and he was forced to resign. My mother, who had been working a part-time job in retail, was fired the moment they heard about her charges. Without my money keeping them afloat, their entire world collapsed. After everything, my mother sent me one last message. It was long and full of excuses. How they had been desperate, how they never meant to hurt me, how they hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive them. She tried to remind me that we were family, that no matter what happened, we would always be connected. I read it, then I deleted it. I blocked her. I blocked my father. I blocked my sibling. I changed my number, erased them from my life, and walked away for good. For too long, I had been their safety net. Now, they had no one left to catch them. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free.